stand up and start. Everyone seems so well behaved. Just saying to the speaker, I think he's used to a far better, more raucous crowd of individuals. But on his visit thus far in the Northwest, we seem to be outstripping the South in our ability to engage in a civil and debatably energized way. Good afternoon. My name's Jeff Thompson. I'm responsible for bringing you here, hopefully, on the basis of a very important step in a very important journey. The Youth Charter Legacy Opportunity for All is first and foremost about young people and how they will have benefited in some way out of the bidding, hosting and legacy of major games. We've got a pretty full agenda, so we're going to try and move at pace, but we'd like you to enjoy it, have something to say. Debating is the very heart of democracy. I'm hoping that with the Honourable Speaker here and our panel guests, who I'll introduce in a moment, that we'll be able to do justice in what will happen next. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Sharon Darwin, Principal of UTC, to say a few words of welcome. Sharon.
Hello everyone.
I don't need a microphone. Hello, can you all hear me? Okay. Hands up if you've never been to the UTC before. Welcome. Ooh. Welcome. We're delighted to have you all here. Obviously, the UTC is a college for 14 to 19-year-olds, specialising in creative and digital skills. What you need to understand about this event and the reason why we're connecting with Youth Charter is it represents everything that we do on a day-to-day basis. This event that's happening today, including the seamless way in which Andrew just passed me a microphone, everything has been led, driven, created, arranged, planned in meticulous detail by the students of the UTC. Every last respect. And they have done an amazing job. And if anybody's in the audience who has helped us, so for example, there's a young man here from Moorlands Primary School who's representing his school, who were filmed to ask them about the legacy of the Rio Olympics. And we've spoken to lots of other people about their views. So if you're here, thank you ever so much for the contribution that you've made. Everybody who's here today, you're here because you are the future of this fantastic country and the future of Manchester. And so we hope that you have a fantastic day today and that you gain an awful lot from the experience. As I say, we're delighted to be hosting this event, and we hope it's the first of many opportunities where we work with Youth Charter. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Sharon. As you say, it's completely youth-led up until a few of us adults get in the way and in some way try and help support you into expressing what the future might look like. That's me. We've done that. But more importantly, 4 years ago, literally 150 metres away at the Salford University Egg, we assembled a similar audience. And in Youth Charter's fashion, as a United Nations NGO, we always observe an international day that recognises any issues that we feel reflect our work with young people. On September 21st in 2012, it was a 1-minute silence on the basis of the International Day of Peace. Today it's a lot more local and national, and it reflects a 1-minute silence that acknowledges 50 years ago many young lives we see before us lost in a tragedy in Aberfan, Wales. So we would like to observe that minute silence with the timings set by the control panel. Andrew? I actually went to Aberfan when I was a young sportsman injured, and there was an initiative where we got young people active. And remember turning into this school, and we were sat on these very small benches, and we were told a story by a teacher, and it had a profound effect and impact on a lot of what I would do today. So in acknowledgement of those lives lost, we recognize what this is all about, because it is about young people. It is a 2016 Youth Charter, Legacy Opportunity for All debate, which looks at 4 years on from 2012's pledge to inspire a generation, what that legacy pledge still looks like with the advent of just having seen the 2016 Rio Olympic and Paralympic Games yield one of the most successful, again, games of sporting golden, bronze and silver achievement. How many of you actually went to the Team GB Heroes event on Monday? Anyone here go? Okay, size of the challenge. We were told that some schools actually let their pupils off early, which was a nice thing to know. I think, Sharon, you did. Where are you, Sharon? Yes, UTC students, I'm told, were given some time off. Well, it was a great event. There were 150,000 people who turned out to see Britain's medal winners actually be celebrated here in Manchester. Our timeline is a 24-year timeline, and you will see Olympic and Paralympic greats, and this is my opportunity of offering sincerest apologies for non-attendance for Dame Sarah Story, the Youth Charter Vice President, but as part of the Team GB Heroes commitments in London. It started in Manchester, finished in London. She's having to stay there for commitments that I think were not certainly on her agenda originally, but she has promised to come and visit the UTC again, and I'm going to commit to visiting every school that's present here today. So on the basis of that, and the timeline that shows, the timeline that shows Manchester's effort, and Muirhead, the chair of governors of UTC, will be one of the faces that shared that journey when we were talking about a master plan that would see Manchester bid, host and realise all that you see before you in the Youth Charter journey. The Olympic parade is what it was all about. So let's just share some of those moments. Some of the UTC students actually went to schools to get their views on legacy and what it means to them.
And how well they did, I think that would get like a lot of people involved in sports because they believe, yo, I can do that too. If they can do it, I can do it too. So hopefully, I think a lot of people become more motivated to get into like sports.
Generations of people to actually get active, so it's young people, whether they're slightly older now and want to go, actually, you know what, I want to try something new, because we're different, so it should be really good from that perspective. How it can be utilised from the communities, with whether they want to engage and use sport or physical activity as a vehicle to make that cohesion slightly better, or be.
I think it's inspirational for a lot of kids that haven't seen some of these sports before, and they watch the TV, they see the swimming, the diving, things that they probably never thought about doing. And it becomes, I mean, we've seen that some of the people aren't from privileged backgrounds, some of them are just run-of-the-mill kids that have taken part in these opportunities, and so it's probably opening their eyes, I would think, and inspiring them to perhaps step out of the box and try something different.
I think the 2016 Olympics inspired a young generation, but unfortunately I don't think the funding was there to continue that excitement and inspiration turn into reality.
People genuinely get inspired by the Olympics and Paralympics. I think people really notice it, and even people I know who aren't that interested in sport, sports that are shown on the Olympics and the Paralympics just don't get coverage at other times of the year or other times of the 4-year period. So it does get people excited. I think it can change the way that people engage with sport. They will, particularly I think children will often get involved in new sports as a result of watching the Olympics and Paralympics. And then also the whole thing about the changes people's attitude about disability. And every time you see a Paralympic Games, it just reinforces the fact that communities will feel different about disability.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's like trying to find out like what particular sport you're interested in, because there's different activities. A lot of people go with that whole stigma of like basketball, football, rugby, cricket, but it's like I only found out the other day it was like handball. You know what I mean? I was like, handball, who plays handball? But there's so many different stuff out there that people can do. And once you find what it is that works for you, then do it, because the health benefits that you get from just being active, just moving around, is so for like in terms of like for your bones and your mind and whatnot, it helps a lot.
I think it's definitely part of it. Whether it's the silver bullet isn't really matter, because if you mention the word sports, people who don't like it, then they're completely turned off. But if you can do it where it's a means to an end, so they don't actually know they're doing it. So it might be that you like photography, so you'll go on a walk through the forest, taking pictures as you go, and that is to you what you want to do, but actually you're doing some physical activity. So that is the way of possibly looking at it slightly differently and working with them to do that.
Yes and no. I think there are a number of other physical activity opportunities that are not necessarily sport. So it could be that we should be starting lower down, starting with walking, cycling, things that are not necessarily sport. When you say to people sport, people think that they've got to be brilliant at something, they've got to be able to catch a ball, they've got to be able to run really fast. And for that, a lot of people, that's a barrier. But physical activity, if you're talking about something as simple as walking to the shops, that could be technically classed as sport, but it's not.
I think all the evidence suggests that sport is a wonder drug. It's, if it was a medicine, we prescribe it to everybody, and it is indeed a silver bullet.
I think it's definitely a big part of it. I think it's a good investment. If you're going to spend money on something, then sport is something that makes a real difference to health. It's been proven to make a difference to some quite severe conditions, obviously things like diabetes and cancer and those sorts of things. But also it's a great preventative tool. It can stop people getting unwell in the first place. It can contribute to better well-being and better mental health. But it's certainly not the only thing that works for communities. There'll be other things that will bring communities together and improve health overall. I'm a big fan of investing in sport.
Academy Team GB success and inspire communities. I think in terms of like building a connection to that athlete. So like if you know there's an athlete that like came from your neighborhood, because you feel like, yo, I grew up in a certain neighborhood where it's like kind of poor and whatnot, and I feel like, yo, there's no way for me to get out of that poverty if you come from like a poor neighborhood. But if you see an athlete that grew up from your neighborhood or came from your background, you're like, yo, if they can do it, then I can do it too. So I think that inspires and motivates a lot of people, especially if you can relate to that athlete in some way or some form.
Hopefully the fact that they've done really, really well and people have had that chance to see them and get involved from a social media point of view, but also having the links to local clubs being more portrayed on the BBC, Get Inspired programme has had a lot of hits through it, and that's hopefully really helped to kind of inspire those people to get involved, especially the younger age group where that issue of dropout and inactivity really starts to start.
I think just as I said before, people see it and see they want a piece of that pie. They want to be celebrated as somebody that's done something that's going to be a name that's going to be remembered, and people will think, maybe perhaps they should take part in some swimming, take part in some of these sports that they've not thought of. And I think that the legacy, seeing it on the TV, and kids that have never been have had access to any of those things, it will leave its legacy in that way by getting into people's minds.
I think that Team GB success should inspire communities, because you can see what young people can achieve, whether that be Olympics or in the Paralympics. I think it's an inspiration to all of us and something we should all aspire towards.
other parts of life, people are looking for role models and people that inspire them, and it's about what actually converts people from thinking about doing something to acting. And I do think that Team GB's role models and the medal winners are people that, because people feel a real connection to them, because they feel a real sense of pride, it may just tip them from not doing something to maybe having a go and doing something, even if it's not that sport. We hear lots of people say, well, I didn't want to play hockey, but I started going out running, or I started going out walking or cycling. So yeah, it doesn't have to be that they follow their heroes, but just to do something.
Hopefully you've got a feel for the very extensive consultation in establishing the views of the young, the not so young, and those who are involved in sport. Some of the UTC students came to a Y Sport conference at Manchester United, Old Trafford, and spoke to the latter half of the consultation, the older types you saw there offering a view. But they're the policy makers, and they're the ones deciding what happens as a result of a revised government sports strategy, what will happen with Sport England investing over £250 million over the next 4 years in improving the health and physical activity lifestyle of children and young people. And that is why this debate is so vital and so important. Before we go on to the debate, there were questionnaires equally sent out to a number of schools. And these were some of the responses that we received on the basis of how many watched the games. The respondents of yes, 533, no, 297, don't know, 21, but that's not a bad number. But on the basis if we watch the games, as to how much it might have inspired them, again, the respondents are pretty much even, but it shows that we've still got a lot of work to do. Other countries' performances inspire. Sport is a global sport, and other people's performances might have given that little spark in someone's mind that they could actually be motivated to go to the nearest club. But it's the club and the barriers that determines whether that inspiration becomes a motivation and a lifelong habit. But again, the respondents were equally balanced, participating in the GB National Sports Day after the Games in Rio. This was rather more interesting. Yes, 56, no, 711. So on the basis that the Games do inspire, there's clearly something wrong in the 56 who were able to access the inspiration that would see them take part in a day such as it was, but equally 711 that didn't. Obviously room for work to do. What were the Olympic activities available during the summer holidays? Again, 206 had the opportunity, 374 didn't. And we have 315 who didn't know. Again, showing there needs to be a lot of work done. These are all, again, part of the questionnaires, and we'd like to thank all the schools who did participate, because it will be contributing to a larger report that will be presented to government later on in the year. This was very interesting. Can you afford to participate in the activity that inspired you? Yes, 472, no, 81, don't know, 197. Again, on balance, one of the biggest barriers to physical participation in activity is economics, the cost. BBC, get inspired, again, no, 380, only 46. Use social media, and social media is your tool, your medium, and how you communicate, how you're informed, and how you actually impart or take part in what you're interested in. I am Team GB, which was the hashtag social media campaign of the Team GB effort. Yes, 55, no, 355, don't know, 81. All very valuable insight of informing this debate. I'm going to go and introduce this panel now, so I can shut up and allow them to talk and you to ask questions. With Professor Seton Grogan from Salford University as the Dean of Student Experience. Am I right in that interpretation? He will be able to give a good insight as to what Salford University, who have been and were a partner in 2012 and are equally a partner in 2016 and beyond. But the student experience from what is normally a sport-rich activity environment. Next, we have a young athlete. You're still a young athlete, Abigail. Abigail Iruzu is a long jumper, had aspirations in 2012, had injuries and setbacks, but still has dreams like hopefully you do. So welcome, Abigail. I'm going to skip you till last. Laura Earnshaw is my next panel member, is a mother, entrepreneur of considerable achievement globally, but more importantly is now looking at how she uses all that experience to actually help educate young children and young people to be better inspired through creative learning. And finally, Vimla Apudu, who's one of those interesting global leader-ins in the social media world that, by way of not too many young women making their mark, is someone who will bring a unique insight on how social media can be used to engage, equip and empower our young people and get them physically interactive as well as actively interactive. And by that I mean your thumbs are more active than anything at the moment. We want to try strike a better balance. So it's now left for me to introduce you to the Right Honourable John Bercow, the Speaker of the House, who will try and moderate and manage a very well-behaved audience in what is called the Quadrant. I'm sure he's used to far more challenging and engaging audiences, especially those unruly members that we elect. But Mr. Speaker, it's a pleasure to have you back.
Thank you.
I'm hoping that you will, on the basis of his visits, and the Speaker likes young people. And when I first said to Sharon Gardner, the Speaker was about to come up this way, he said, well, most UT students think he's pretty cool. So the fact that you're seen as pretty cool should in itself allow a very interesting exchange. I would like to introduce one other sportsman of considerable note, Marcus Adam, Commonwealth Games gold medalist, Olympic finalist, and uniquely one of the only individuals to have competed in both a summer and a winter games. Equally, he's been a Youth Charter ambassador for a long part of the journey. So Marcus, thanks for coming and welcome. You may clap. Mr. Speaker, the audience is yours.
Jeff, thank you very much. Members of the panel, students, sports enthusiasts here gathered, thank you for coming. And Jeff, thank you to you for your leadership and inspiration in making this event happen. The Youth Charter is a big cause for you, has long been, and I'm sure will continue to be. Sadly, it needs to continue to be, because despite all the progress and the numbers of people that you've drawn in, the responses to the survey still show that there's a lot of work to be done in building on a legacy and translating people's excitement at the time and inspiration at seeing great athletic performances into practical activity by themselves, either in the particular sport concerned or in another sport. So I suppose really the idea at the heart of all this is how, on the back of a huge national effort and a number of individual and team performances of real accomplishment and distinction, do we bring about a greater level of interest in and practice of sport. Sport across the piece, sport whatever that particular sport might be. And why might we want to bring about that great sporting accomplishment? I suppose the answer is fun, which is a pretty good reason in and of itself, because I've got young kids, and I must say that for all that is sometimes said by reactionaries, by very old-fashioned people who always think things were better in the past, I think kids work harder at school than ever before. Certainly my kids seem to do more homework than I did or than my wife did, and having fun by playing sport is a pretty good reason on its own. There's a second reason which has been hinted at in some of the contributions made, namely that it's incredibly healthy, and we do in this rather sophisticated world in which we have a lot of processed food and a lot of pressure on people's time, have challenges to health, with a lot of people sadly living much less healthily than they should. And there are all sorts of risks in terms of obesity and diabetes and all sorts of other conditions that can come about as a result of poor diet or inadequate exercise and bad habits. So sport is a terrific counter, or if you like, antidote to that risk. And I suppose there's a third feature, and some people here are very well placed, Abigail is incredibly well placed to talk about this, and so are others, to sport, and that is developing teamwork, self-discipline, and what I've always thought as a very undistinguished junior tennis player, which I was about 40 years ago, is incredibly important, and that is an attitude, young people, that says never say die. Do not give up. The possibility of defeat does not arise, and however long it takes and however hard you have to practice and however matches you have to play and however many competitions you have to take part in, you are determined to win, and to win more often than you lose, and in particular to fulfill your potential. And that's great, both for success in sport and really as a route map to the fulfillment of your potential as a citizen, as a person throughout life. Now, for those of you who haven't the slightest idea what I do, I've got to know Jeff over the years, but I do serve as Speaker of the Commons. Jeff is, of course, absolutely right, though he deserves no great brownie points for perception in making this observation, that you seem to be vastly better behaved than my colleagues in Parliament, who tend to shout and scream a lot and have regularly to be called to order. You seem extremely civilised, but I mustn't risk an outbreak of disorder by boring you. So I chair the proceedings in Parliament, and I try to ensure that debate is conducted in a civilised way. And I've come to Manchester last night to speak at the University of Manchester, which I did. I gave a lecture there. But today the focus has been very much on meeting young people, the Wythenshawe Pupil Parliament this morning, and then I went to talk to and answer questions from and to engage with students 16 to 18 at Loreto College. This event, this Youth Charter event, building upon the Olympics, is a second time event for me, because Jeff very kindly invited me to a building 150 yards away 4 years ago. That was September 2012. Just over 4 years later, I'm back here at Salford in the media hub, if you like, for a similar event. And I think, again, the idea is that we should have a debate about sport, based, I think, very much on your questions. So I hope that that's what we're going to do. And I've got the opportunity of stage directions from Jeff. If I make a mess of it, or I go off-piste, off track in some way, then I hope that he will help put me back on track. But I think that the idea is that we hear from you, and we hear from people with backgrounds of real experience, lessons they've learned, which I think they'll be happy to share with you and to impart to you, people who've been very successful and distinguished in their own fields and continue to be. So with that by way of introduction, I just want to say it's huge fun and a great privilege to be with you. I'm in Parliament Monday to Thursday, but I try to get out on Fridays, some of the time, of course, in my own constituency, but I try to preserve a lot of Fridays to get round the country and to meet, talk to, and hear from people from all walks of life and different communities. But in particular, I love meeting and hearing from young people and trying to offer, as I know all our panelists will do, young people encouragement to aspire and to believe that they can fulfill their potential. So with that, I hope that we're going to hear from you. Have we got questions for our illustrious panel members? I hope we have. Now, I'm going to take, can people say who they are? Sarah. And Sarah, you're a pupil at
St. Mary's.
St. Mary's Church of England Primary School. Please, tell us your question.
Children in Rio did not seem to benefit from the games while they were going on. Will a child's right to be the best that they can be, Article 29, be part of the Rio legacy?
Children in Rio didn't seem to benefit from the Olympics while they were going on. Thank you, Sarah. Will children's right to be the best that they can be, Article 29, I think, probably of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, with which you are more familiar than most people in this hall. Congratulations to you, Sarah. Will that become a reality? And if so, how? Now, I'm going to be very naughty here, because I have got to choose somebody, and I'm going to... Oh, I was going to ask Abigail, actually, who's a rather illustrious sportsperson. No disrespect to No disrespect to the Pro Vice-Chancellor, Professor Grogan, who's himself very distinguished, but I was going to ask Abigail, no? Or do you want to give somebody else a chance? You want? Yes. Basically, how will a child's right to be the best that he or she can be, how will that be delivered? I suppose we read this in the context of sport. How are sporting opportunities of individual children to be maximised? In very broad overview terms, if you had to pick, Abigail, 2 or 3 things that you think should be priorities, what would they be? Can you hear, Abigail?
Okay. Oh, yeah, you can hear me now. So that was an amazing question. I love that question. And I think you might have been speaking specifically about children in Rio or children across England, the UK.
In the London 2012 Olympics, a lot of the children in Britain, they went to sports activities and lots of sports programs. But in Rio, you didn't see a lot of that. How do you think in the future, how do you want it to be, like, more of it?
Okay, so you mean that following the London 2012 Olympics, there was a lot of heightened participation, and now following Rio 2016, you've not seen that rise in participation? Okay, fabulous. I think that first and foremost, in London, it was a home Olympic Games, so that contributed massively to heightened participation. It was on people's doorsteps. Even if it wasn't, it was easy for people to get access to the Olympic Games. They probably knew some people who knew an Olympian or a Paralympian. And so that would definitely increase the inspiration factor. But like we've already spoken about, I think it's massively important to incorporate the idea of fun into every sport that you do. That's the reason why I keep doing what I do. I love it, and that the heart of it is the fun factor, getting to meet my friends, and travel the world. That's amazing for me. But some of those statistics in there, like 37% not being inspired to participate in sport, I think that's to do with, I've lost my train of thought now. I think that's to do with the feeling of that's too far away. So we love the challenge as athletes. We know in our head we are Olympians, or we're going to be Olympians or Paralympians. I think sometimes people see that and they think it's too far out of reach. How many of you in front of me here today participate in sport of any kind? And how many of you have aspirations to be an Olympian? And do you believe that you can be an Olympian? Okay, so I think it's that belief factor. So it's great that you guys in front of me have that belief, but some people participate and they're just like doing it, and they feel like there's no point in doing it because they're not going to achieve these Olympic grandiose title. But actually we need to say it's not just about getting the title of Olympian. It's about participating because it's fun, and we'll show you that it's fun by this, that, and the other. I think it's really important as well, not just the fun factor, but also for me, having the athletes go into schools, go into those different districts and inspire the school children. Have you ever had an athlete come into your school before? You've had Jeff? Have you had a young athlete recently come into your school? A younger athlete.
What, younger than Jeff?
So I think schools don't have enough of that, I think. I went into a school recently, 2 days ago, I think yesterday, in Liverpool, and just the impact that had on the young students was incredible. And knowing that as athletes, how many of us went into the Olympic Games, how many of them were there, and how many of them actually go into schools and inspire, even just one school. If we all did that, it would make a massive impact. Yeah, there's not very many, your teacher said, so yeah. I think I've talked enough.
Well, very effectively, Abigail. Thank you very much indeed. Jeff's just whispered in my ear that between 2012 and 2016, there was something like 2,000 visits around the country by Team GB Olympic athletes to schools. And that is a good start, a very good start. But I suppose it just shows how big the challenge is, because there are so many schools to get round. And I guess what one has to try to identify is an obligation on a successful athlete, really, which you have, Abigail, fulfilled beautifully today, to try to pass something on and offer encouragement and example to others. And as you say, not just on the basis that everybody's going to be as successful, but on the basis that they might succeed and become Olympic athletes, title winners, medal winners, but even if they don't, the journey itself is worth doing because it's fun, and hopefully you've developed a sporting interest for life. Can I ask Laura now, Laura Earnshaw, to come in, who is an entrepreneur, as has been described, and who specialises in, I think, cultivating mental well-being in young people would perhaps be the best way to describe it. Laura.
Yeah, hi everyone, it's great to be here today. I was reflecting as you were talking, I'm clearly not an athlete, have never been an athlete, but do enjoy sport. And I guess my reflection and answer to your question was, you know, there has to be the kind of the athlete inspiring the young and people going into schools and all of that. I think that's really critical. But I also think communities play a really critical role. So whilst you can think of it as, you know, the superstars at the top kind of inspiring down, I think actually the real superstars are people like you who might be at the bottom now, but you can inspire up. And so I guess what I would say is it's all back to the self-belief that you articulated so nicely, and it's for you guys to make that be part of your community and make sport a focus for yourselves, and I guess not wait for somebody else to give you permission or the answers to have that energy and that inspiration. I think, you know, community is something that I know Jeff is hugely passionate about, and I think that's definitely part of the web of creating a legacy around sport.
Abigail, please come back.
I just want to quickly add to that. I always get asked who inspires you and who inspired you to jump long or jump far and to get involved in athletics. And my answer to that, I've never had an idol. I've never had somebody who's inspired me in that way when I was younger. I'm inspired, like you said, by my community. So my training partners are amazing people, and I'm inspired by, I didn't watch any Olympics until the Beijing Olympic Games, and that was only because I was supporting my training partners who were there competing. So it wasn't the fact that I watched the Olympic Games and was inspired. I just loved to participate in sport. I'm all about relationships, I'm all about community, and that's what got me more involved in participating in a wide range of sports and activities at a young age. Yeah.
So, if you enjoy playing sport with your friends, whether you watch the Olympics or not, whether you want to go to the Olympics or not, whether you want to be an Olympian or not, keep playing and practicing because you enjoy playing with your friends, because you'll probably keep that set of friends and you'll develop new sets of friends. Now, Sam, yep. Professor Grogan.
Hello, can you hear me? Good, super. First of all, I think your question is absolutely amazing. And congratulations for asking such a beautiful question. You certainly set the bar for the rest of the event.
Very high.
Very high. And it's inspirational to hear you. I'm going to come at it from the question from a different angle. And I think that the real nub of the question is, how do we make sure it happens? Now, the speakers so far have touched upon a personal responsibility that you might take to get involved and be inspired. But I think, and I would say this because I'm from the University of Salford, it's about partnership. It is not possible for any one of us or any one organisation to do this on our own, because there simply, if we did it on our own, is not enough to go round. There will always be a need for more. And if I think about those individuals you speak to, how do we get them involved? How do we make sure that they have the opportunity to be inspired? So I think it's about organisations such as the university and government and individual entrepreneurs and tech startups and inspirational speakers like this actually not doing it by ourselves, but it's about collaboration. And so key to making it happen for everyone, making it happen for you good people and for people who are further on in their development or behind right at the start in their development. The key thing is about working in partnership and not doing it on your own. Because then if we can share resources, If we can work out, actually, you've got a football pitch that can be used by the community and actually can be looked after by the university or another organisation, or could be looked after by a different set of people, what we get then is everyone chipping in, and everyone can give a little bit in order to make it happen. And today is a perfect example, because the other angle to that partnership is, I think it's essential to get people out there that it isn't done to you. Because if it's done to you, you don't have any ownership of it. What it needs to be done is done with you. And actually, the best ideas, as we've had demonstrated by the very first question, will come from you. People like me in a suit, I haven't got the best ideas. Sometimes I don't know what I'm doing, truthfully. But the best ideas to help me steer what I do and to help me help you will come from the ideas like that. So for me, fundamentally, it's about increasing partnerships.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Sarah, as you can see, your excellent question has spawned quite a debate. Now, I think we'll take Vimla, and then perhaps Jeff might want to add something. No? All right, well, we'll take Vimla, and then I'm going to ask for another question. Vimla, please.
Thanks. Oh. Thanks. Yeah, that's better. I think it was an amazing question. It was really, really good. And I want to focus on the help people to be the best person. And I completely agree. I think partnerships are a really, really key part of that, and how we can all help each other to be better. And through sport, doing that through better facilities and better opportunities. And I think it's the opportunity part that's key. So making sure that across the UK and across the world, every person from a young age has the same opportunity to be able to aspire to greatness and be the best person that they can be.
Vimla, thank you very much indeed. Oh, yes, I've got somebody who's been provoked into wanting to ask a question in the best possible sense. Now, what's your name?
Lachey.
Lashen. Please, Lashen. Also from... Sorry?
Lachey.
Lachey. From St Mary's Church of England Primary School. Give us your question, please.
So in St Mary's, one of our main focuses is Article 29, the right to be the best that we can be. And by doing sport, how does that help us be the best that we can be and help the community?
Sorry, can you just say that second part again? Go on, how?
And by doing sport, how does that help us and the community be the best that we can be?
And by doing sport, how does that help us and our community to be the best that we can be? Well, I think this way round, we'll do it a different way around this time. Yeah, Vimla.
Thanks. That's a really good question as well. And I think sports is just one part of it, and it's just the beginning. So sports is one way that we can be the best we can be. It can encourage you to participate in activities, it helps you make friends, and it helps you learn to work as a team, and it can also give you a competitive edge as well. So push yourself further and further.
Okay, Laura.
So who loves science? Hands up if you love science. Hands up if you know what dopamine is. I'm not going to pick on you. Do you want me to pick on you? What's dopamine? Give it a go.
It's like a chemical that when you do like sports or something, it kind of gives you like a rush.
Exactly. Well done. Round of applause for that.
Wow. So is this a performance-enhancing drug?
No.
It isn't. What it gone?
So when you exercise and when you do sport, a chemical is released in your brain called dopamine, and it makes you feel really, really good. Okay. It's the same feeling as when you're with friends and you're laughing and you're having a good time. So if there was any good reason to do sport and to help it make you feel your best, it's that release of dopamine that you're going to get.
Now, the great thing about these occasions is you learn something new every time, and thank you, Laura, because I've just, as you can tell, learned something new, but I won't forget that. Dopamine. If you want a dose of dopamine, you should play more sport. Thank you. Now, Abigail.
How does doing sport help us be the best we can be?
Yeah.
For me, I think it's very individual, actually. So for me personally, going through the challenges of injury, that seems to be my personal and professional challenge in sport. It helps me to develop the attribute of perseverance. So perseverance means persisting, never giving up, even despite the setbacks that we've gone through. So you all who do sport, how many of you have lost or lost a game before? Yeah. Me too. So, how many of you want to give up when you lose the game? Sometimes we do, don't we? Sometimes we do. And with my most recent injury and surgery, having missed the Olympic Games in Rio, and believing beforehand that I would be there, having jumped the standard, to have to go through that heartbreak again of missing another Olympic Games made me want to give up, and it made me announce my retirement. I was like, I'm done with this. I'm done with this sport at 26 years old. I'm quitting. And then, honestly, I was ready for the retirement, and I'm going through this rehab process, and I'm falling in love again with what I'm doing. And that makes me be the best I can be, because like somebody said, it's about fulfilling your potential, and I think that's really key. Knowing that if you have more inside you, you shouldn't quit on somebody else's terms or on the terms of what my body is trying to make me quit. Sorry.
What's happened?
Sorry, I'll stop in a second. But you should just keep going. So for me, now I'm starting to run again. I'm feeling that joy of it all, and I know that I can be better than what I did the last year and the years before.
Thanks, Abigail. Now, Sam.
That's, another really good question. We've got some really quality questions coming through here. I think there's two things that helps in the way that sport helps you be the best you can be. Number one is if you're playing it, you're continually testing yourself, and you're sitting outside your comfort zone. So you might run a bit faster, or jump a bit higher, or go for a bit longer, or work on if you're football, working on a tackle, whatever it might be. But it pushes you outside your comfort zone, because inside your comfort zone, you're not learning. And for me, and I would say this coming from a university, sitting in here now in a university technical college, UTC, I think learning about yourself is the bit that pushes you further. And that for me, if you can be a learner for the rest of your life, I think you would be the best that you can be. That's number one point. And number 2 point is, I don't think sport in any fashion, be it chess or be it running or whatever it might be, is an activity that you do entirely on your own. I think there will always be the need to have people around you. And for me, being the best that I can be means being part of a group or a team or a collection of people, or at the university, a set of people who help other people teach and learn. So it's about being not independent, but about being interdependent and working with others. Because if I'm on my own, I'm never going to stretch myself the full way. But when I've got other people, Abigail said about her running partner, when that happens, so the training partner, when that happens, actually there's other people there to stretch you further. So for me, it's about being outside your comfort zone and working with others to go further. Fantastic.
Sam, thank you very much. I mean, I think you can see the force of that. If you think of team sports and you think of the people you play with, you might be the best, though even then, if you're going to stay the best, you'll probably have to keep working because there'll be people chasing you at your tail. But if you're not the best in the team and you see the people who are, you've got an incentive to do better. One of my own kids is a keen footballer, not a great footballer, but a keen young footballer, and he always talks about the people in the team that are the best, and he's sort of, in a sense, modelling himself on them and trying to get as good as them. But even if you do an individual sport, mostly on your own, you don't then have the benefits that Sam's just described of interconnectedness and so on. But even then, you're still doing something which is good for health. So even if you do sport at a modest level, it's good for health. And as somebody who's a bad swimmer but swims 4 times a week every week, I must admit, switch off from work at that time and just do that activity quite monotonously. But I must say, I do feel, not just physically, I feel mentally better, pupils, for doing it. You know, is it essential? No, probably not. I could probably get by without doing it, but I'm slightly fitter for doing it, and I just feel better for spending that period, 45 minutes at a time, just swimming back and forth, and when I come out, I just feel more vigorous and more alert, than I would, because I've got a rather sedentary job sitting in a chair most of the day. And a lot of you will go on to do jobs that involve quite a lot of sitting, to be honest, because a lot of jobs are like that. And therefore it just seems to me that the physicality of sport and the mental benefit of the physicality is worth having. Please.
It's great that we're trying to help keep the legacy of the Olympic Games. However, as children become more well known to the sporting industry, do you feel that social media intrudes the child rights of privacy, and how do we help them with this, such as Tom Daley got a lot of aggressive social media comments?
Wow, the questions just seem to get better and better. That's a really good question. I think it was pretty clear so you could hear it. What about the effects on privacy of people who play sport competitively and are at an increasingly high level and therefore become publicly known? Don't they have to put up with a lot of abuse, as Tom Daley, the swimmer, of course, had to put up with the most appalling abuse? And what do members of the panel make of that? I wonder if Laura, indeed, Vimla.
Yeah. So I think social media has a really positive role to play in the world. It's helped make the world become a smaller place, and it means we can all talk to each other in a much easier way. However, it's the responsibility of the social media companies like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram to put in the right reporting mechanisms to protect people from that. But we all have a responsibility on social media as well to report things that we see that we disagree with, but also highlighting it to the communities and the people we respond to as well. So it's not just the responsibility of those companies, but we all need to take a bit of that responsibility ourselves and conduct ourselves on social media in the same way we would everyday life.
Vimla, thank you very much indeed. Laura, what's your take on this?
Yeah, I can build on that, because I think it's an issue that young people face in or out of the public eye, actually. I think social media, as you've said, is fantastic and has done many great things, but can also be something that's really scary and something that can be really damaging for young people. So I guess for me, the key thing here is, a phrase that my mum and my dad said to me when I was young was, sticks and stones might break your bones, but names will never hurt me. And actually, I think it's the reverse now. I think that people get a lot of name calling and, not nice things being said to them or about them on social media. So for me, the key word is resilience. And I think it's really critical in the world that young people now live, that they have the resilience to be able to hold themselves high and believe in who they are and believe in what they're doing, and almost have a shield around them, actually, to not become affected by things like that. But certainly being in the public eye and social media is a huge issue.
It might, just before I draw Abigail and Sam in, it might just be worth saying that, in a sense, those who are taking part in social media conversations are self-selecting. That is to say, they are choosing to participate, and there are a lot of them. But there are far more people at any given time who are not taking part in the conversation. And so I suppose what I'd quite like to plant in people's minds is the idea that a debate on social networking sites can very easily be skewed by what is actually a noisy and vociferous, maybe even articulate, but noisy and vociferous and very abusive body of people who nevertheless are in fact a tiny minority. So they, like most people, may think that they speak for everybody else or most other people, but actually, particularly when they're being sexist or misogynistic or racist or homophobic, they almost certainly don't speak for most people. They speak to their own prejudices. And so I suppose somebody on the receiving end of a lot of abuse should look for support from friends, but try to remember that those people may shout very loudly and be very nasty, but actually the silent majority of people almost certainly don't agree with them if they notice what they've said at all. And if they do notice what has been said, they probably very strongly disapprove of that sort of abuse. Sam?
I think that's... Hello? Yeah, it's there again. I think that's, again, a really good question, and certainly one that is increasingly something that we're thinking about at the university, not just in terms of sport, but actually in terms of wider practices. I think you good people, and I'm looking at the young people in the audience, are in an age now where the difference between physical friendship contact, like we're all sitting physically in the room now, and virtual contact is increasingly becoming blurred. And I think social media is just a tool. It has, as Vimla said, has huge positives and potential huge negatives, and it's about the way it's used. So I think, as well as the corporate rules that Facebook or Twitter might put in place, I think we owe it to ourselves to adopt, as Vimla said, a personal responsibility about how we are, and also recognize when to step away. Switch off your phones. I know that's an anathema, but switch them off occasionally. The other thing I would say is that in that personal responsibility, it's absolutely right to recognize that those debates will carry on. There will always be people out there who will spark up that debate and agitate and annoy. And I think what we need to think about in reference to sport and in reference to the personal, being personally out there, being personally visible on social media, is that if you wouldn't say it face to face to someone's face, absolutely, don't say it on social media. Absolutely. And if we were just take that single thing, sorry, speak louder. If we could just take that single thing, I think a lot of things wouldn't get said on social media. Thank you. A lot of things wouldn't get said on social media. So if you wouldn't say it face to face, don't say it there. And actually thinking about the rules that you adopt yourself for engagement on social media might help you there, as well as the corporate parameters, in order to get the most from what is an amazing tool for good. It's how we use it, and that makes us personally responsible.
So Sam, thank you for that, and you heard what Sam's just said. In a sense, another way of expressing the point you've just made is that quite a lot of social media abuse, which is, in a sense, anonymous, is cowardly behaviour.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, in a sense, that's how perhaps one should think of detractors and abusers and so on as essentially cowards. I'm going to ask Abigail, and then if you'd like to come back, because you're looking quizzical, and you might want to come back on that and offer your own verdict on what we've said. Abigail.
Okay. Yeah, it's a great question. I always follow the rule, well, not the rule, but just the maxim that my mother used to say to me: the answer to a fool is silence. And like they've mentioned, it's cowardly when people want to attack somebody on social media for whatever reason. There's no reason to behave in such a horrible way. And it happens to people in the media, in the spotlight, but also to young people who may not be on the television or well known. And I think just that key to just be silent, to not respond, to delete the comment, to not, what I see some people do, retweet it and then continue the long conversation about it. Oh, look what this person wrote about me. And then it's continued, and that person is getting exactly what they wanted, to be visible. Why would you give visibility to something so negative? We're trying to promote as a society positivity, and those people that are behaving in that way don't even deserve your thought. They don't deserve to have that limelight. So I'd say that's really key. And people are always, it generally stems from jealousy, I think, when people are attacking, because they might not be able to achieve that themselves, or they have issues that they're going through. So I'd say just be silent, delete the comment, and move on.
Wow. This question is really very powerful, and I was rather inspired by that response. I mean, Abigail's an athlete. I'm a politician, but in politics, it's often said, it's a great mistake to repeat your opponent's most hostile words. You may, in some circumstances, feel you have to respond to their argument, and in other circumstances, the argument is so poor and so abusive and so low grade that it is better just ignored. But what you certainly shouldn't do is repeat your opponent's most hostile words, because all you're doing is planting them into a wider set of minds than would otherwise hear them. So that's the force of Abigail's point. Whatever you do, don't retweet if you have something hostile said against you. When I was starting out in politics, I had a family relative who's no longer with us, who was no longer alive, who had fallen out with my father about half a century before. And when I lost an election, the relative wrote to me a deeply nasty letter. I was in my 20s, wrote to me a deeply nasty letter saying, how pleased he was that I'd performed so badly, and it confirmed his low opinion of me and so on. And my mother was at the time very upset, and she said, you know, you must write back to this estranged uncle and rebuke him and so on. And I said, absolutely not, Mum. Absolutely not. I'm not going to engage. I'm not going to respond to the guy. You know, he's got problems of his own, presumably, but I'm going to rise above it. I'm not going to engage, because all I'll do is give him a sense of satisfaction. And I know that's from my world, not from sport, but the principle is the same. Or I think, as Hillary Clinton said the other day, when they go low, you stay high. It was Michelle Obama who said it, not Hillary. Sorry, I do beg your pardon. I do beg your pardon. It's unfair to Michelle Obama. But it was great advice from Michelle Obama. If people go low and they plunge the depths to attack you, you rise above it. Okay, did you want to come back on that?
I was just going to say, do you think it attacks their privacy? Like, social media gets so involved that they don't sort of have a private side to their life as well. It more attacks what they do in their personal time more than the sporting side.
Who wants to come back on that? Vimla.
Thanks. That's a really good question, because privacy is something that's coming more and more important, and what happens with data and security. So in terms of hacking accounts and that kind of stuff as well. There are kind of two key points. One is you can have your own privacy settings on the accounts. So if they didn't want to share a lot of what they were doing, they could put those on, which is a kind of our personal view. So if I didn't want to share on social media, I wouldn't, which isn't necessarily the answer, because we should all have the same right to do that. But it is an infringement on their privacy, but there's a way of articulating it in that what was once in the newspapers is now on social media. So you've got a two-sided sword now, where you get it both in the public realm on newspapers and social media. It's just that it's easier to have a conversation on social media. So I would agree it is an infringement on their privacy, but it's something that, as we've kind of discussed already, it's their option to put it on there as well. So if they're putting it out to the world and people are going to respond, it's not in their own hands, but it's something that we all need to consider on what we're putting out there too.
Thank you. Does anybody else want to come in on the back of that? Please. Does that work? No.
I think when someone's private life that they haven't chosen to put out there on social media is scrutinised on social media, because essentially all that is rumour, it's not fact. I think it is an infringement of their personal life. And I think at that point, it's with the person who is being exposed, or their private life is being exposed, it comes back to what Mr. Speaker said about actually taking the high ground and not then furthering the conversation, and actually being safe in the knowledge that it is just rumour and they don't know what they're talking about. And so rising above that takes a lot of strength and a lot of discipline, which goes back to the previous comments around resilience. But walking away from the debate is probably the strongest thing that someone could do, I think.
Sam, thank you. Have we got more questions? I hope we have. Yes, we have. Well, in fact, may I be cheeky and take them in twos now, because I don't want people to miss out. So let's take the guy here, and then the young lady in front, please. We'll take them successively, and take yours and then hers, and then, yeah. Your name is?
Matt from Malbank.
Matt.
Does this work?
Yeah.
Yeah. Why isn't there an additional budget for sport in secondary schools that is ring-fenced like in primary schools?
Why isn't there a ring-fenced budget for sport in secondary schools in the way that there is in primary schools? Thank you. That's one question. And can we take yours as well, please?
Precious.
Your question, please.
So from before we were talking about Olympics, so why is Olympics important?
Why is the Olympics important?
Yeah.
Thank you. So, why no ring-fenced budget in secondary schools for sport, and why is the Olympics important? Who wants to get started on this? Yes, Abigail, please.
Okay, thank you for the questions. Why is there no ring-fenced budget for secondary schools like there is in primary schools. Now, I am not a member of Parliament, and I don't know about the policies behind it, but there's a similar thing that goes on in athletics and in sports in general, where they really focus on the grassroots meaning, you know, the youth, the really young people, getting them into sport and participating. And so that's why they really have to have that focus of funding for the younger generation so that they can have that solid foundation. And then I think when it comes into the developing area, so between grassroots and elite, so maybe between that place of primary to further education at university, unfortunately, that's where people do fall by the wayside, and that's a problem that I see as well in our sporting community, and it's something that I'm trying to address as well with UK athletics and UK sport, to not just neglect the developing, because that middle sector seems to always be neglected, and it is a shame. And I think it's mainly because they feel they've done their job. So we've introduced you to sport in primary up to the age of 11 years old. Now it's time to let you go and see what you do with that. We've given you the foundational principles. Why don't you know what to do next? And it kind of is like, I understand that mentality, but at the same time, I do feel like there should be a ring-fence budget. I didn't know there wasn't. Even if it's a little bit lower, it should still exist, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's a very
Are
helpful.
we supposed to address both points at the same time?
Yes, sorry, if you can. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Why is the Olympics important?
And as to why the Olympics is important, I think it's a... Okay, so I think this is awful that I don't really know, but as in terms of the Olympic Charter, or the idea behind the Olympics developed, was to increase participation at all levels, but also at a high level, to showcase the abilities of people, to showcase the fact that people have been disciplined, they've worked hard, and I think it's all to do with participation, actually. And I think that's why the Olympics exists, which is why sometimes there's a debate as to the selection policies, because we're trying to say, why are they so steep when you're actually trying to be inclusive? But there's also the idea of participation, as well as participation at the highest levels.
People have a basic pride in their country, perhaps, and you know, the idea of competing for your country against competitors from other countries, I think will probably always appeal, not to everybody, but to a lot of people. I guess it's the most enormous honour to represent your country in a sport, and the idea that you're playing for your country rather than just for yourself, I guess is probably a bit special. Sam?
I'm going to deal with the second question first. I think the Olympics are important because they aren't just an event about sport. Obviously, that's the primary focus, but they're also about art and music and theatre and sport and culture and community. And there's so many things that sit within that Olympic bubble that actually the impact that they can have for a country, as we're seeing now right here in this debate, is a lasting legacy. So even if you weren't necessarily very interested in sport, there's actually legacy that can carry on way beyond that. And again, in some of the work we do at Salford University, we're thinking about the many different ways that sport works with communities, works with business, works with entrepreneurialism, works with community groups, works with a whole range of other disciplines, so that we can have a real impact. So I think it's about impact, because they can change lives, fundamentally. In terms of the question about budgets and why there isn't a ring-fenced budget, I think the reason is, and it aligns to what was said by the previous speaker, there isn't necessarily the detailed awareness. There's the first push in a primary school, and then it carries on, and then it peters away. I think there is not quite an understanding of the fundamental benefit of sport as you go through that developmental stages for your own personal well-being and the sheer impact that sport can have. I would say the same for the arts. We're seeing the arts slowly drop away. and actually benefit from the arts, benefit from sport, benefit from cultural activity is not as central as it could be to the debate around funding. And actually, if it was fundamentally positioned as front and centre to that debate, actually the benefits of it would be understood much better. And I think it's not about the data and the facts. We've got all the information and facts. We know that it really does good, but actually, increasingly it comes down to an economic debate only, a debate about finances. And it's not about a debate about finances, it's a debate about well-being of a nation, which will increase productivity, which will increase all the things that lots of people count. And sometimes it shouldn't be about just the things that people can count. And that's, at the moment, that's why I think it's not having the ring-fence funding, because people aren't listening to the right words sometimes.
Laura.
I'm going to pass on the funding question.
Okay.
Because I don't have an answer to it. But in terms of why the Olympics is important, I think from my perspective, one of the things that I always love seeing on the Olympics is it's one of the only times that you see all countries from all over the world coming together and being together in a positive, fun way. And with so much bad stuff happening in the world today between countries, with wars, religion, etc., excuse me, it's a really amazing time just to see the countries coming together and celebrating life.
Vimla.
Yeah, I'm going to pass on the funding question as well. I think the Olympics are really important for all of the reasons that have been said, but also it's a great way for everyone to get together in your community to support a country, whether it's the country you live in or a country that you're from or a country that you relate to. And it's also a really great way for people to showcase issues that they that are happening at the moment as well. So the Rio Olympics focused on refugees and migration, and that's a great way to educate the whole world on what's going on as well.
Vimla, thank you very much. Jeff, do you want to say something? I'm happy to offer one thought about funding, but Jeff.
Just very short. The funding models currently in British sport are very much fragmented and not integrated. And something called the Whole Sport Plan should see a social grassroots development performance pathway to excellence start to see an investment consistently supported, and not seeing in teenage years, which are arguably some of the most challenging years, the right support put in place. That's why the new sports minister at the time, Tracy Crouch, recognised that and very much called for a new sports strategy. That sports strategy is now looking at how money is more cohesive, it's more integrated, and the investment starts seeing more collaboration and more partnership between the governing bodies. So in short, they're not competing, but they're collaborating on getting the participation, and then they can start looking for selecting the potential that might want to go on and represent their communities, their national or international representation. It's worth noting that the Olympic Games has a far greater global representation of countries than the UN. It is the only unifying force we have. At one stage, war stopped. Sadly, they still continue. But if there was no Olympics or Paralympics, what would there be?
Thanks. It's just worth adding a point on funding that, of course, the funding bodies are charged with promoting participation, and their grants rather depend on making progress in that regard. I can't help but feel, I don't want to set up a great competition between different sports, but I can't help but feel that, frankly, there are some sports that do much better at promoting participation than others. And, you know, I'm a huge tennis fan, but I'm constantly saying, I think they're doing a bit better now, but I'm constantly saying to the Lawn Tennis Association, look, it's incredibly important to redouble and make better your efforts to get people to play your sport across the country as a whole from all walks of life. And the fact is, historically, rugby union certainly and tennis have been disproportionately played in the independent school sector and much less in the state school sector. And is that a problem? I have to say I think it is a problem, because 93% of kids go to state schools, and if in those schools there's little opportunity to learn tennis or to play rugby, well, that's reducing hugely the pool from which future champions and future generations of enjoyment can derive. So, I think that matters. And I made this point once in a very, very middle-class tennis audience, and people looked rather blank. And somebody came up to me afterwards and said, Mr. Speaker, I'm bound to say I don't really agree with you, because Andy Murray is a very marvellous tennis player, and of course he went to a state school, and I said, yes, but with respect, there is one key answer to that, and that is Andy didn't become a great tennis player through learning tennis at his state school. Andy became a great tennis player on the back of the fact that his mother was a successful tennis coach. That's how Andy got into tennis. So in a sense, he's magnificent, but Andy's an exception to the rule. Most state school kids don't get that chance, and so, you know, forgive me saying so, but I think my point stands. Right, who else? Okay, who have we got? Yes, your good self.
In different communities, why would we need the prices for different sport clubs to be cheaper? So in this debate, why do you think that we should make sports clubs cheaper?
Why should we make, as I think you think we should, why should we make, people talk about the theme of making sports clubs, sports participation, maybe sports lessons, cheaper, helping in that way, because otherwise there's a big cost deterrent to people from poorer backgrounds. Yes, you are gesticulating most furiously, so we'll take you as well. Why should we make sports clubs cheaper? Yes, please.
What are the qualities you need in becoming a successful athlete?
What are the qualities you need? These are really good questions, very well delivered. What are the qualities you need to become a successful athlete? Okay, and I think, Jeff, you were signalling there was somebody at the back. Who's the person at the back of the hall? Yes, your good self, with your hand up. Thank you.
This one actually links to the first question asked just then. What's your opinion on the lack of advertising availability and cost of sports clubs and other leisure clubs for children and young people in the working class today? So,
cost of, broadly speaking, thank you, cost of participation and the ingredients of a successful athlete. Now, forgive me, I'm going to start with Abigail, I think. Are you content?
So we have the cost of participation, the ingredients for a good athlete, and yours was about advertising in working class areas. Okay, so I will start with the easiest one, for me anyway. For me personally, and from my experiences of training alongside Olympic champions and Olympians, and from the wisdom that I've gained from their experiences as well as mine, I would say that there are a couple of key ingredients. The first one is to love what you do, because they wouldn't do it if they didn't love it. As soon as they fall out of love with the sport, or they feel like they've accomplished everything that they've done, that's when they're ready to stop. I think it's really key as well to have an amazing team around you. So like we've all been talking about relationship and community, making sure that you have an amazingly supportive, knowledgeable team, and teammates as well, who can elevate your level of thinking when perhaps you don't have that self-belief that you need to have in yourself when you're going through any struggles that you are going through. Because in life we all go through struggles, and sport is very, it's a great transfer between life and sport, because you're going through this roller coaster at times. And so I do think that the love and the team that you have around with you, and obviously the self-discipline that you have, because sometimes, I know for me leading into 2012, that was probably one of my most difficult years. I was in my final year of university at University College London, and I was studying law with French law. So it was a massive task to know that I was studying in my final year of university, but also trying to get to an Olympic Games, even though there was probably no way that I was going to make it, because I'd never jumped that distance. And the amount of training, waking up at 6 a.m. I do not wake up in the morning. I'm not a morning person. I dislike it massively. But having to wake up at that time, to go to one side of London, basically it was a lot of hard work. 6 days training during that time. Maybe I would be training twice a day. And so that level of commitment that you need to have a self-discipline. And you need to know the reason behind why you're doing it. So even when it gets difficult and it's really dark at night and you don't want to go to training, that you still go. There was times that I was shoveling snow off the track just to run in the track for training. So it's like double training sessions, but you do it because you're committed to what you love what you do. Sorry, I'll try to be really, really quick.
No, it's fine.
Onto the funding for, funding.
Yes. The cost of clubs and reducing the cost
and reducing
the advertising
the
of
clubs.
sport in working class
Unfortunately, I think that, and especially in these times with Brexit and all this craziness with the economy and stuff, that the cost of participation in clubs is actually going up, because particularly in my sport, in athletics, and I'm sure we know with all of the drugs problems in the sport that seem to always be highlighted in athletics despite it going on across the sports, sponsors are pulling out, so that's where you get most funding. You get funding from the sponsors. We used to be sponsored by Sainsbury's, for example, in athletics, and these sponsors are pulling out, which means that there's less partnership, and Sam talked about partnership, which is massively key. And unless there is partnership, it's not going to be possible for club subs, whatever the cost of club membership is, it's going to increase. So it's massively important to have partnerships for young people to participate, because the higher the participation, the more people are going to want to put money into that sport. And also it's key to have inspirational figures at the top who are saying the same things. So it's important for people like Jessica Ennis, Usain Bolt, people like that. I'm just talking about athletics, other sports as well, Andy Murray in tennis, to say, hey, we need to really campaign for grassroots, because they've got the money to go into these clubs and do what they need to do. In fact, we actually get paid to do what we do, whereas the younger people have to pay to enter these facilities. It's kind of ridiculous when the prices are £2.70 or £3 per go. If you want to do that 5 days a week or even 3 days a week, it all adds up. And as to the point at the back about advertising,
of sport in working class communities,
I unfortunately don't have a lot to say on this point, so I may have to pass on that.
That is perfectly reasonable, entirely reasonable. Now, and Sam, do you want to come in? Thank you.
Just very quickly,
Abigail,
in terms of the qualities for an athlete, I think it's about a need, not even a want, a need to get better. It's the same about what I said earlier about learning. You've got to need to do it. It's almost like not having a choice about it. A need to do it, a passion for what you do, and a recognition that your job is never finished. So there's a load of grit there, of determination. That's all I've got to say on that one. I think there are many more things, and I think Abigail has said it far more ably than I have from direct experience. In terms of advertising, I think there's a huge amounts, and I would look to Vimla on this, but huge amounts to be said for the power of social media. And the clue is in the title again, social media. And it goes back to what we've been talking about partnerships. There's a huge amount, if we think about all the crowdfunding campaigns that are out there now, the crowdsourcing and the way people are organising themselves and disrupting the models, so that rather than a big company sponsoring something, and this goes back to the cost of the clubs as well, actually, if we think about the disruptive models of business that are coming through, and I look to my colleague Professor Spicer there from the University of Salford, who's head of the business school, the disruptive models, if we think about Uber or the Airbnb, they've completely changed the landscape. So I think there is opportunity there, and the ideas will come from you to find a different way of doing things. And that speaks to perhaps both the cost, because I don't think the cost should go up. I think actually we need to find a different way of doing it, and fundamentally to that is, as has been said before, it's about different partnerships. The old models, because of social media, because of the digital revolution, are breaking down, and they're not going to be here forever. But it's up to people like you to invent the new ones, because you've got your finger on the pulse. And it's a problem there, and I'm not denying the problem, but actually the answers are just not more of what's happened before. There's new answers, and we're just on the cusp of them. So I don't personally have the answers, but I agree with your statement that they cost too much, and the advertising is perhaps not where it should be at the moment. There's new models there to be teased out. It's a very exciting time.
Sam, thank you very much indeed. Vimla.
Yeah. I completely agree. I think marketing on social media is just one way of doing it, and there's loads of room in sports to address how community events and community sports can be disseminated into different communities. But I think the problem's a lot bigger as well, because as you said, there's a big disconnect between sports and working class and sports in across the board. And I think it needs to go down to a local government level and support within community centres to enable more community members to have access to that, to the facilities that are there. And I think that goes to the costs as well, as it's not something that we're going to be able to have an answer for here and now, but it's something we all need to be aware of, that costs can't go up, and we can't let there be another barrier for people to get into sports and to have that the belief and drive to know that they can be an Olympian one day. We need to start breaking down those barriers and figure out ways we can do that together.
Vimla, thank you. Laura? You'll take another one? Yeah, let's take another question. Yeah, good. Okay, we've got somebody hit. Sorry? Yes, I beg your pardon, I haven't looked adequately over there. Yes, what about the young woman in the middle of the second row? Yeah, and then we'll come back here. And there's somebody at the back, I think. Yes, the young guy at the back. Let's take 3 in a row, and we'll try to mop them up as best we can. I didn't mean that derogatorily at all. Please.
Hi. Professional athletes receive exceptional injury treatments and rehabilitation, often from private providers. Could some thought be given to subsiding the treatment of young athletes, particularly at grassroots level, in order for them to make similar, timely recoveries so that they might resume their sporting activities?
Wow, subsidising rehab and therapy for people with sports injuries at an early stage in their career to hasten their recovery and enable them to fulfill their talent. Good. That's one. We had a second. I thought I'd said the second person here. No? Yeah, please. And then the guy at the back. Thank you. So, subsidy for rehabilitation and therapy.
I was going to say, do you think social media has a total effect on the Olympics?
Does social media have an effect or a total effect on the Olympics? What's the effect of social media on the Olympics? Thank you. My colleagues are busily thinking about these questions as they come. And then the third question from the gentleman at the back. Thank you.
Why do you think there's more funding in some sports than others?
Why do I think
there's more funding in some sports than others?
More fun in some sports?
Funding.
Sorry. More funding in some sports than in others. Right, okay. I think this time I'm going to suggest perhaps Laura?
Yeah, I can give it a go.
Thank you.
I'm not sure I've got a good answer on all of them because I'm not ingrained in the sporting community, but I think to the first question or the second question that came around social media, just from a very personal experience, I think because you have contacts on your social media account, you share your own stories with those contacts. So, for example, I was seeing stories of Olympic successes that I hadn't necessarily followed because somebody in my network had shared it, and I think the total kind of impact of that can be huge. So I think sharing those positive stories, sharing maybe the personal stories of athletes was a really powerful outcome of social media. The question over here about rehabilitation, I really don't have anything to say other than I think it's an amazing idea, and I'd be tapping some people up that provide those services to the professionals and seeing if you could get an angle on that, because I think it's a really awesome story to be able to tell, because you're quite right, if people at grassroots are getting injured and are not getting the same support to be rehabilitated, then they're never going to make and reach that potential. So that's definitely one you should be pursuing, maybe with the help of social media. And I'm going to pass on the third question.
Almost a crowdfunding for support or subsidy. Okay, now, Abigail. Oh, sorry, I do beg your pardon. Sam, you were ready to go. Sam, please.
I'm just going to answer that question over there, and I think it is a brilliant idea, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we do at Salford. At Salford, we have a priority at the university called the Industry Collaboration Zones. And those are zones in the university, they're like big front doors where anyone can come in and ask any question. But one of the zones is focused around sport. And what we do in that zone is work with the academics and the colleagues at the university and then we work with industry, and then we work with the users of that industry. So in your example, the athletes that you're talking about, the clubs, the societies, the local community sports groups, and actually what we do already is sports rehabilitation. And so what I'm advocating again is through a model like the industry collaboration zones, which are front and centre engaging the university with a wider set of partners, businesses, stakeholders, groups, schools, colleges, community groups. What we actually work on is the means and the model to provide that kind of care. So we do that already. We have a sports rehabilitation degree which sees our students actually providing the support for people with those injuries. I do a little bit of running. If anyone's heard of Tough Mudders, I'm a strange Tough Mudderer, and I enjoy running across the country. I injured myself last year, and I went as a customer to our own sports rehabilitation students, and they fixed me. Wow. So there is the model out there, and it's outward facing. It's not about the university working on its own, but actually it's about the industry collaboration zones and actually it's working with industry. So the models do exist, and I think, as you said, and I couldn't have wished for a better plug, it is a fantastic idea, and it's something that is the front and centre of our strategy going forward, because actually the big clubs and the professionals have got those things, so it's about plugging that gap, and it comes back again to what I've said before about partnerships. Yeah.
Thank you. Vimla?
Yeah. I completely agree. I think it's an amazing idea to get subsidised rehabilitation for young athletes. I think that's a great solution, but I don't know much about rehabilitation to be able to comment. I think the social media effects on the Olympics, that was one of these questions. I agree. I completely agree. It's about who you know in your network, and it can give you a lot of information that you wouldn't have easily known, or stories that you would have heard. Particularly if you don't watch the Olympics, you're still getting access to that. And I think it goes back to creating a smaller world. It makes it easier to see what's happening and how people are celebrating globally. And I think that's an amazing thing. And it helps people to celebrate. And it's one of the positive things about the Olympics too.
Thank you. Abigail.
Okay, so I think I'll go for that one and that one. About the why is there, sorry, what was that question?
Why are some sports better funded than others?
Yeah, why are some sports better funded than others? And it's actually, the answer to that, from what I know, is it's based on the amount of Olympic medals that sport achieves. So at the grassroots level and the developing level, it's all dependent on the elite athletes performing at their best, getting the medals, because if they don't hit that certain medal target, they won't get that same level of funding. In fact, it will be completely cut. So I know some sports where their funding was completely cut because they didn't make a final, they didn't get the medals that they needed. So they have to wait for another Olympic cycle to try to fulfill that. So it's kind of this horrible circle where if you don't get the medal, you don't get the funding, but then you're falling further and further behind. And for us, fortunately, for track and field and maybe swimming as well, and certain sports, there will always be funding because it's kind of the heart of the Olympic Games. I know that I think cycling had their funding cut. I don't know when they basically have meetings about it, and it's based on the amount of medals that you win at the Olympic Games. And as for that question over there about the subsidised physio and massage therapists and therapy costs for young athletes, I think that's also a really great idea. But I think it also relates to the point on advertising, which I didn't talk about before, but it's about ownership. In this modern age, we have the internet, we have Google, and for advertising, if somebody's inspired by the Olympic Games and they've seen this sport that they've never heard of before. 2 days ago, a young girl in school said, someone's campaigning for water skiing to get into the Olympic Games. I don't even know what water skiing is, but she was so excited about that. And, for me, to find out what that would be, I could YouTube it or Google it. A young person as well could do that same thing because actually they're so tech literate. A young 1-year-old or 2-year-old can go on a tablet and Google things really easily. And I think that's the same thing with the physiotherapists. There are things out there. There are subsidised therapy clinics out there for young athletes, even if they get themselves involved in a club. That I know for athletics anyway, the coach, if they get injured, the coach can direct them to someone. The coach will try to help because they know that it's going to be a challenge for the young person to try to do it on their own. And I think it's key. It's great that Salford University has such a great clinic as well that's subsidised for the public. So I think it's all about taking ownership. Even if the young person is too young to do it, hopefully the parent will be able to Google and find out these things, because unfortunately advertising costs are quite expensive, I imagine.
Abigail, thank you very much indeed. Now, Jeff, of course, is a multiple champion and medal winner in karate, and he knows a thing or two. Jeff?
I think firstly we have to accept that sport has enjoyed a lot of funding over the last 15 years. Therefore, we should be asking ourselves why certain sports that don't need funding still receive funding. There is clearly a premiership of the governing bodies who receive money, who've got money, and then there's a first division of sports who arguably provide more participation value to communities than the premiership. So, as an example, building an equestrian centre in Brixton in London isn't exactly the best investment in grassroots participation, because stereotypes are there for a reason, although it's good to dispel them. But 23 million plus £1 worth of money invested in more participation-friendly activity is the best way to invest that money and see a better return on that investment. Basketball is another sport that always falls between the lines of a whole sport plan. And by that I mean they are not represented in the Olympics, so they don't receive a lot of money as a result of that. In London, they did, as the host nation. We invested heavily in basketball, but once the games had finished, there was no further investment. And these are the disconnects, because in the communities that I engage with, and the young people I try and engage with, basketball is very cool, very participative, and very much part of the culture. So I think we have to look at the swimming, the athletics, the basketballs, the combat sports. These are all activities that are socially and grassroots participative, inner city, suburban or rural. Having yachts, having bikes, and having sports that will yield a large investment of medal return may well not be able to engage our communities. So I think we need to look at this rather differently, and that's what the sports strategy is trying to do. If we get that participation right, the advertising will come and the social media activity will build on that and create more investment.
Jeff, thank you very much indeed, members of the panel. I'm looking for guidance slightly on timing, because you'll stop me when we need to stop. Okay, right, can we have another round? Have we got someone else? The young guy there, and we'll take the... I actually think the young guy at the back has been waiting for ages, so we're grateful to him. And I want to take this young lady here. Thank you. So, yourself, please.
So, how do you think new sports in the Olympics, such as fishing, will affect the younger community?
How will new sports in the Olympics, such as fishing, affect communities? Thank you. Our friend over here, please, if somebody can get a microphone to him. Thank you. Here. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Recently, mental health came up in the latest PMQs.
Yes.
And as a graduate from university, I've recently graduated with £55,000 worth of debts, with interest rate expected to go to £100,000. As a student, there's an incredible amount of stress and pressure, and I believe our universities are a ticking time bomb. How do we encourage more students to get into sports? Because we know sports is fantastic for mental health. And at the same time, remember, the students now have to work maybe 20, 30 hours just at Nando's. At the same time, they have to study. And at the same time, they also have to take part in sports to things. Well,
how do we encourage?
How do you encourage, yeah? And how do you look at solutions for
to take up sport, or to either continue or to increase their sporting activity? Thank you. Okay, and our third question, please. We need a microphone just over here, or I can offer you mine.
Do you think do you think every human around the world gets the right to like, for example, if do you think no matter how rich or poor you are, do you think every human around the world gets the right to be what they will want in the future?
Do I think every human, or do we think every human around the world gets the right to be what they want to be, or to be the best that they can be? I fear the answer to that at the moment is no, though it's a huge moral challenge to try to tackle that. But the panel will answer as they think fit. Now, you've got the questions. Who's going to start? I think I'm going to ask Sam to start this round.
Okay, so I'd like to address the question from the gentleman over there. I think it's a really valid question, and I think that it is certainly of our time. You have hit it's the zeitgeist you're actually speaking of. It's very interesting that you position that question from the direct experience of being a recent graduate, which is great. Congratulations. I think the answer to that, and again, I'm going to draw on what we're doing at Salford University as an example to tell the story of that, is I see the development of a university curriculum not to be just about the academic program that one studies. And so, as well as just the program you come to study, BA or BSc, maths or science, whatever it might be, I think it's about universities should continue the job from schools about developing the whole human being, developing the whole person. And for me, that then draws into how sports and how other extracurricular and co-curricular activities sit alongside and with the academic discipline, the program that person came to university to do, in order that they can develop the whole person, which means, therefore, that those activities need to carry in some way credit and badges and bells and whistles, so that when the student leaves university, it isn't just a degree they've got. They've actually got a whole set of attributes and characteristics and personalities and achievements that they can talk about, that might be sport, in order that they can then go and be successful at the interviews, at the graduate positions. So for me, it's about actually finding a way, and we're doing this right now at Salford University, again, through the industrial collaboration zones, to help a student almost gain credit for doing those things so that they count, so that they're not just a club that they go to. It's, as well as being fun, and that's an important part of it, I think they also need to carry extra weight going forward. So it's about, again, about integration with the core academic activity. That's not an easy task, because actually I think that if someone is doing work outside the curriculum and perhaps through a sporting club, demonstrating leadership skills, demonstrating teamwork skills, everything that sport gives us, they should be credited for that. Now, that is not a normal model of pure academic study. But what I'm interested in as Pro-Vice Chancellor at Salford University and my colleagues is how do we develop our students and prepare them for life. And life isn't just about study or paying off the debt. So for me, fundamentally, it's about developing a human being, a citizen, a global citizen. Yeah,
Sam, thank you very much. Now, I've received instructions that I'm afraid we do need to wrap up, so I apologise to my colleagues on the panel who might have been champing at the bit. But I would like, in wrapping up, to say a number of thank yous. First of all, Jeff, thank you to you again for your experience and your passion and your inspiration and your continuing commitment to the cause of the Youth Charter, to the promotion of sporting opportunity, to the concept that people can and should and must be better enabled to fulfill their potential. You are, if I may say so, and I've known this ever since I met you 5 years ago, one of those forces of nature who make things happen by your ideas and your determination to translate your ideas into practice. So, first of all, a round of applause for Jeff. Thank you, my friends. Secondly, I want you to thank all of the panelists who've given of their time and experience, as well as their interest in young people, to make this the afternoon that it has been to all four of them, from their different walks of life and their different areas of expertise. I think we owe them a big thank you. Thirdly, students, my friends, I do want to say a very special thank you to the University of Salford, to the business school, which is a part of it, and to all those who've given of their time and in a sense have put their moral impetus behind today's event. I think you have heard Sam and the answers that he's given, and he's spoken with very considerable authority and distinction. But Salford, as a university, has been behind us today, and they deserve to be properly respected and appreciated. To Salford, to the Media Centre, but to the university, thank you. And finally, because it's been a great fun experience for me too, I would like to thank all of you who've taken part, because you can have a panel and you can have a sponsoring university and you can have a building, but unless you've got young people who are interested and engaged, asking brilliant questions and showing their commitment, the event would not happen. So, it may be eccentric of me, but I ask you to give yourselves a round of applause. And I think Jeff, I know I've sadly got to go back to London pretty soon, but I think Jeff envisages a few photographs, and it's been huge fun. Thank you very much.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. In summary, everything that we had hoped has been achieved. A 4-year cycle from 2012 now takes us through 2016, looking what a legacy opportunity for all might look like. Every single thing that has been discussed, debated, and suggested will reflect a legacy impact report that will be submitted to government, and with the Speaker's help, as he presented our 2013 Games Legacy Report, we hope to be in the village of Westminster to be able to have your opinions and your contribution shared. When we talk about the next steps, we have to talk about what tangibly can happen. And we've heard about the industrial collaboration zones and the Youth Charter will be working closely, and David, I know our Pro-Vice Chancellor may well have already set out what that might look like, with time as the enemy and both a friend. I think simply on the basis of our call to action, you cannot have participation without good coaches. We asked for 10,000 social coaches in our 2012 Games Legacy Report. We're asking for it again for 14 than others. So we can have social coaches that provide the emotional relationships, that give the resilience that we're talking about, that mentally equip our global citizens with rights and responsibilities. I believe we'll not only get participation numbers, but we'll get outcomes that see our communities far more cohesive and far more collaborative. The partnerships we talk about are part of what the ICZs will be and our community campuses, because our facilities are barriers, economic barriers, and we're now getting commitments here in Manchester to be able to allow them to be open for 5 hours a week free, because it is a fundamental human right that every child and young person has sport, art, culture and digital technology as part of their everyday offer. Then we have the social coaches, and then we have something that is truly sustainable and truly achievable. I need to thank everybody, but if this UTC team would just like to simply come forward, because I've worked on many initiatives and we've done lots of different things in lots of different ways, but the end quotes would simply suggest that whilst these are all quotes that can be picked up through social media, and we won't want to bore you, but the one thing I would say is St Mary's, Malbank were a 4-year relationship. Malbank had the boulevard, we made that happen. Jeanette Walker made that happen. She drove it and asked for some help. And Jeanette, what was the result of that boulevard?
Which is the centre of a lot of community events. We have a family learning centre, so we invite adults and families in. We had 3 of our students at the Olympics. Bryony Page won a silver medal in the trampolining. and another of our students was in the hockey team, and one of our mathematicians doing the stats. So they had a Malbank reunion in Rio. We have a community sporting facility, which very sadly I've had to close this summer. My students still get the benefit of it. My staff are fitter, healthier than they've ever been. But we've had to close it because the limited funding that schools now get means I can no longer afford to subsidise this community facility. So very sadly, it was staffed by our students for our community, and that's had to close. However, we won't give up. We've got lots and lots of things going on as well, but clearly that's sad.
So it's still a continued fight, and a fight worth fighting. St Mary's, another extraordinary school, I'm sure you'll agree. I've never heard young, bright minds ask such so decisive and challenging questions. But just so we understand what an inspiration can look like, someone who inspired me and who inspired the world in Muhammad Ali had some values: confidence, conviction, dedication, giving, respect, and spirituality. His values are now his legacy. St Mary's will be the first footprint of that legacy out of Kentucky. And the programme will be launched in January 2017 to mark what would have been Muhammad Ali's 75th birthday. There will be lots of things happening. With UTC, they'll be happening. And in thanking the UTC team, they were extraordinary. And I'd like them acknowledged, please. Please, thank you, and sorry are always the magic words I end with. There are lots of people here from the Youth Charter family. There are lots of you, lots of us. Make it happen. I always end on this. 14 lives have been lost in London that look not like you, but are of your age and your generation. They will not have the opportunity. And when this began 24 years ago, inspired by a 14-year-old schoolboy, Benji Stanley, who didn't have the opportunity to feast on it, it inspired our work. It still inspires our work. It still haunts our work. And we will be fighting and never giving up on the opportunity for you to develop in life and to achieve your full potential. Have a good half term. Thank you most sincerely. God bless.